I solved Poppy Playtime. It's become a bit of a cliche lately, hasn't it, to say I solved X before giving what is essentially just a theory. Hey, listen, don't blame me or other creators, okay? This is just how YouTube is now. You gotta be dramatic, okay? You gotta be dramatic. That being said, I think Mob Entertainment recently gave us a huge clue hidden in plain sight. A clue that adds further context to several long-standing theories, proving some, disproving others, and it might just be the key to solving everything about this series. And it all started with a thumbnail. Hello everybody, it's been a while since I've done a proper theory, hasn't it? I've been focusing on a bit more variety content lately and I've been really enjoying it. But since it's nearly Christmas, I thought I should probably give the fans what they truly want. More unhinged theories! But we are now officially in the run-up to Poppy Playtime's 5th chapter. Mob have been teasing us with more trailers, more character reveals, more little snippets of story that inevitably won't end up in the actual chapter. But among all of these new reveals, I think one tiny detail might genuinely just have solved so much of the missing lore of this series. That tiny detail is this number 5. You see, this new logo for Chapter 5 is clearly a reference to the horrors of Playtime Co. This 5, representing Chapter 5 of course, is made up of a strange fleshy substance. Now this is actually a key defining feature of this series. What sets Poppy Playtime apart from other series like FNAF or Bendy is that the monsters here aren't some haunted mascot death traps or fictional characters made from ink. No, these toys are living, breathing experiments, all of them brought to life due to the miraculous scientific process of Playtime Co. This scientific process has been something of a mystery all the way back since Chapter 1. Right from the very first trailer of this game, we saw that the innocent-looking Poppy doll was actually alive. Not just alive, but she was filled with blood, part doll and part flesh. In future chapters, we learned that Poppy and Huggy weren't the only experiments. Playtime Co. had been secretly creating hundreds of these living toys. Some, or probably most, of these experiments were made from orphans. As I have theorized many times now, likely those children with terminal illnesses. Elliot Ludwig had created a whole orphanage program within his toy factory, a place to house those children who were less fortunate, giving them clothing, education, a roof over their heads, and more importantly, bringing them joy. I made a whole theory that this scientific process began as a way to give a second chance to those children who were sick or dying. Those with terminal illnesses, those who suffered accidents, those children who would have only lived short lives were now given a chance to live long, healthy ones, surrounded by friends and the big Playtime Co. family. Considering that Elliot himself suffered a tragic loss in his own family, it makes sense that in his mind this act was a good intention. His mission was to bring joy to as many children as possible, and this scientific process was the next step in his great work. But it wasn't only children who were given a second chance. Staff members like Thomas Clark were also given the opportunity to undergo the scientific process. After contracting lung cancer, which was likely a result of working around so many dangerous chemicals, Thomas was turned into a living version of Bron the dinosaur. Now, that didn't exactly work out well for him. In fact, it didn't really work out well for any of the staff. Experiment 1006, the prototype, orchestrated an uprising in the event we now know as the Hour of Joy. The toys, led by 1006, violently attacked and overthrew the staff, killing most of them in hours. But all of this horror, all of this mystery is all underpinned by one crucial detail: the scientific process. You see, we've had hints to what this is, we've seen the results of the science, both the successes and the failures, but we have never truly been given an explanation to how it works. That is, until now. You see, as much as this is science fiction, and as such you have to suspend your disbelief at least a little bit, I mean FNAF literally has haunted locations. But one of the biggest head scratchers in Poppy Playtime is how exactly did they bring these toys to life? Sure, for some of the toys like Huggy, you could assume it was as simple as a brain transplant into a synthetic or toy body. Just pop someone's brain into its new body and away you go, right? Well, as I've said a few times before, not exactly. Your brain contains several maps of your body. This is why when some people lose limbs, they can still feel sensations in those limbs. This is a phenomenon known as phantom limb pain. Even the most simple experiments like Huggy Wuggy would be far more complicated than just a simple brain transfer. That bigger body wouldn't match the map that the brain had for those children. It would take months, if not years, for the brain to adapt to its new body, and even then there's no guarantee that it would work. We might have been given a little hint to this with Kissy Missy in Chapter 2. Remember, we watched her struggle to use her long arm to pull down a simple lever. We even got another clue to this in Chapter 4 with Riley. We learn in Riley's tragic notes that she was struggling with the idea that she could no longer separate her fingers. Her new toy body presumably had less fingers than she was used to, or maybe none at all. This is honestly kind of horrifying. Imagine someone permanently glued your fingers together. But the big problem with Playtime Co's scientific process is that the experiments aren't all simple. In fact, many of the bigger body toys have extremely elaborate or complicated designs that would make this problem even worse. I mean, how exactly does Boxy Boo swallow his prey? Where is his neck, mob? He has no neck! But I think this recent tease can not only explain exactly how the scientific process works, how these wacky designs can function as a working body, but even why the prototype was willing to work with his arch nemesis Harley Sawyer. So one tiny detail in this logo that you might have overlooked is that the edges have tiny tendrils reaching out, tendrils that almost look like veins. As I have said, this is likely to signify that the toys on the inside were alive. But this is also likely the mysterious poppy gel that we learned about all the way back in Chapter 2. This mysterious substance was supposedly key to the scientific process. This is exactly why the prototype keeps poppies growing down in the labs all these years later. We know that Elliot Ludwig originally began experimenting on small animals like mice, something very common in scientific fields, but after having very little luck, he decided to move on to something bigger. This obviously implies they moved on to testing on humans, but keep that in the back of your mind for now, because I think this is actually very important to this mystery. They needed bigger test subjects. I think the reason why this substance has these vein-like tendrils is because this substance is designed to grow. Playtime Co could remove the brain of a test subject, implant it into the new toy body, and then fill it with some of this poppy gel substance and growth medium, letting it fill up the new body. Not only would this substance provide a living organism for the brain to live within, but it would grow into its new body. Fusing with the brain, it would grow new muscles, new flesh, new nerve endings, and perhaps even a new skeleton. While this wouldn't solve the issue of the host's brain still containing a map of the original body, it would solve the problem of these new bodies with all of their intricate designs. Any body of any size or shape could be made to work, as long as they use the right amount of growth medium. We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a very special announcement. Did you know that Team Theorist had a merch store? I didn't. That was until they reached out and told me that they've just done a collaboration with Poppy Playtime. Now, this is not a sponsored segment. I haven't been paid for this. They literally just said, if you want some free stuff, here it is. If you want to talk about it in a video, that's great. If you just want to wear it in your own time, that's also fine too. So a huge thank you to Theoryverse for sending me out some free stuff. They sent me this hoodie, which I'm now wearing to edit this video. They also sent me a t-shirt, and both of these have a bunch of little hidden details, which as a theorist, I think is really awesome. The hoodie even contains Le Mans. But I really like it. This is super high quality, it's super soft, super comfy, and I will definitely be wearing this hoodie a lot. So a huge thank you to Theoryverse for sending this out to me. And yeah, if you want to check it out yourself, I will leave a link down in the description below to the collaboration. They've got a bunch of stuff on there, and I think it all looks pretty nice. So there you go. Check it out if you want to. If you don't want to, that's also fine. Let's get back to the theory. Okay, so this miracle substance was being used to create living flesh suits that grew within their assigned toy bodies. But that isn't the end of this mystery. Far from it. You see, there is still a mystery of what exactly the prototype was so desperately trying to solve. We learn in Chapter 4 that 1006 left Harley Sawyer alive. Well, kind of, so that he could help with a problem that 1006 was struggling to solve. Considering that Harley Sawyer tortured 1006, it seems very odd to leave him, of all people, alive. This obviously suggests that 1006 needed him for something. Well, I previously theorized that this problem was related to why 1006 wanted to keep Poppy in her case. In my previous theory, I suggested that Poppy is slowly dying. You see, we have seen throughout the chapters that Poppy's eyes are slowly becoming more and more bloodshot. I theorized that Poppy's case was not only a way to keep her contained, but it was actually a form of stasis. We saw in that original trailer that Poppy was being fixed. This was elaborated on in a tape in chapter 4 that told us that this was something that happened to Poppy regularly. In that theory, I proposed the idea that the reason why Poppy needed fixing on a regular basis was that as one of the oldest experiments, she wasn't fully stable. Something about her design, perhaps a flaw or an oversight, meant that Poppy was slowly deteriorating. Perhaps her body or her mind. Either way, without regular checkups, Poppy would eventually die. Now that the factory staff are all dead or missing, the prototype needed to keep Poppy in stasis until he figured out a way to fix her. But now that we suspect these toys are filled with this growth medium, I think it makes perfect sense. A substance that has the power to grow into any size body is no doubt a miracle, but it does leave one major problem. How do you stop it from growing? You see, I think I might have been right on the money about Poppy. I think she is deteriorating, but now we might just know why. That growth medium inside Poppy isn't stable. Poppy's eyes are slowly becoming more bloodshot. If you look closely, they are slowly filling up with more and more veins. This would add so much context to why Poppy is slowly cracking. I mean, literally. Her face mask having a crack might have been a huge clue. The crack wasn't from the train crash, it's from the growth medium pushing against the inside of it. This might explain why the prototype filled Poppy's case with the red smoke. The red smoke, when not causing strange hallucinations, was designed to keep the orphans asleep. It's entirely possible that the red smoke was actually keeping the substance asleep. I think this is exactly the problem that 1006 is struggling to figure out. In that VHS tape, Sawyer remarks that this was a difficult problem even when the factory was fully operational. This is a problem that was discovered in early experiments like Poppy, something that Playtime Co figured out for later experiments like Huggy and Kissy. They just couldn't figure out a way to fix the substance inside Poppy. Playtime Co found a way to stabilize the substance that they created for later experiments, a way to stop it from growing once it reached its desired size. But now, with most of the staff dead, 1006 and Harley Sawyer are struggling to find the same solution. Likely because the man who figured it out was Elliot Ludwig, the genius visionary behind the scientific process in the first place. Remember, Harley Sawyer was kicked out of Ludwig's Young Geniuses program. I'm willing to bet that only a select few higher-ups and scientists truly knew Playtime Co's biggest secrets. Lathe Pierre, after all, was incredibly paranoid about company security. But I think this mystery goes even further than that. Sure, it makes sense that 1006 wants to stabilize Poppy. I have a whole theory about their relationship, but it does seem like the prototype views Poppy as family. But what if it's more than that? There has long been a theory that the prototype is building something big. This was first brought to light just before Mummy Longlegs died. She claimed that she would be made a part of him. We got another hint to this in chapter 3 with Catnap's shrine, something Catnap seemed to worship, but something Ollie, who we now know is 1006 all along, remarked, "Wait until you see the real thing." This is implied to be the biggest experiment we have ever seen. To bring this to life, the prototype would need that growth substance. Plenty of it. So far we've seen that he's been harvesting the toys that the player character has defeated. Each one contains an amount of that very same substance, but unfortunately for him, that substance has been stabilized. If the prototype doesn't know how to stabilize the substance, we could presume he also doesn't know how to make it grow. All of this glowing substance we see around the trailer might be his failed attempts at recreating it. This particular attempt had the teeny tiny problem of being highly flammable. So the prototype is trying to reverse engineer the Poppy gel growth medium so that he can bring his biggest experiment yet to life. But why? So far, the presumption has been that the prototype has been building a new body for himself. His body is clearly unfinished. He is, after all, the prototype of the experiments that came after. This theory has been around since Chapter 2 and has been pretty popular. But one of the recent trailers told us that we think we know that he wants, but we don't. Not yet. Well, if the prototype isn't making a new body for himself, then what is he making? There are plenty of possibilities here. Perhaps he's making a new body for Poppy, one to replace her old broken doll. Maybe the phrase, "this one you'll never want to leave," was a hint that the prototype is doing all of this for her. This would also tie into my theory from Chapter 1 that Poppy will be revealed to be the villain all along. Perhaps Poppy's actually working with 1006 to take down all of these other experiments so the two of them can create her new body. But I think there is a more likely explanation. The prototype is building this body for the orphans. Ever since the Hour of Joy, the prototype has been trying to keep the experiments under control. For some, like Huggy Wuggy, this was easy. He was noted as having maximum obedience. Theo owed the prototype his life. He viewed him as a god. Mommy hated the staff so much because of how they treated the orphans, so of course she would side with the one who wanted to overthrow them. The others, though, were not so easily convinced. We saw in Chapter 4 that several factions had formed in the aftermath of the Hour of Joy. Some toys didn't even want to participate in it in the first place. These toys resisted the prototype's control, leading to what was essentially a civil war in the years that followed the Hour of Joy. I think the prototype has figured out a radical solution to this latest problem. That is, after all, the fundamental foundation to this story: innovation. Every single thing in Poppy Playtime comes down to science being used or abused to solve problems. Elliot, with his mission to bring joy to children, bent the rules of science to bring them living toys. Later, this very same science was used in an attempt to solve the problem of death. And now, I believe the prototype is going to try to use this science to try and solve the problem of conflict. Sure, he could turn all of these orphans into new experiments, but as he has seen firsthand, these experiments argue, bicker, and worst of all, fight. After all, they are still children. Well, most of them anyway. What better way to stop them from fighting than by turning them all into one giant toy? One singular shared consciousness, free from the shackles of conflict and war, or at least that will be how the prototype sees it. This is a problem that Playtime Co were all too familiar with. The red smoke was, after all, a way to control the children at night. Control is just one more problem that Playtime Co used science to solve. But just like how Harley Sawyer and the others saw the scientific process as a way to free people from death, that's not how everyone views it. We have learned time and time again that being turned into a toy wasn't the miracle it seemed. In fact, it was more like a living nightmare. Riley was a huge hint to this. She had hands, but they weren't hers. In the exact same way that the previous staff failed to realize that sometimes death is kinder than life, the prototype now fails to realize that free will is key to the human experience. You cannot solve death by replacing the body any more than you can stop humans from disagreeing. The prototype is doing what the prototype has always known: innovation. But this particular innovation is something that will only bring ruin. But I even think that Mob have been hinting about this growing substance all the way back since Chapter 2. In this theory, I've talked about the idea that this substance has been stabilized by Playtime Co, but it seems like there is a possibility that that's not entirely true. One common theme we've seen with the antagonists of this series is that their physical state seems to reflect their mental state. Both Mommy Longlegs and Doughy showed physical changes as they both descended deeper into madness. It's entirely possible that as these experiments become more mentally unstable, the growth substance within them also becomes more and more unstable. This might be what we're seeing happening to Poppy. As we see her struggling more and more mentally, she herself is becoming more and more unstable. This could be a huge problem with the experiment that the prototype is making. If he is indeed planning on making an experiment with all of those orphans using a massive amount of this growth medium, imagine all of that suffering, all of that trauma amplified into one giant body with a huge amount of this new chemical. Seeing Doe turn into this giant monster form may have been a massive clue to what's going to happen to 1006's experiment. All of those negative emotions transformed into one giant monster. I think this is how this series is going to end. The player character is going to realize that if the prototype isn't stopped, he's going to create the biggest monster the world has ever seen, both literally and figuratively. A huge kaiju-sized doll brought to life with the shared consciousness of each and every orphan that is being held in Playtime Co. Just seeing how lethal the bigger bodies have been, imagine how dangerous a giant body would be. I think this series is going to end with the player realizing that destroying the factory, thereby killing the orphans, is a kinder fate than what the prototype has in store for them. Perfectly mirroring the prototype and Playtime Co., the player would do one final bad deed, but one with good intentions. But we've seen before that Mob Entertainment love to surprise us. Perhaps there is an even crazier explanation for all of this. Either way, I cannot wait to find out more when we finally get our hands on Chapter 5 next year. So what do you think? Am I close on this one, or is this just another Tericho unhinged theory? Let me know down in the comments what you thought. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.